estate planning is even more critical for a single woman than a woman who is in a partnership or is married.
Are there any unexpected financial shocks that women face after death of a spouse or kind of a later life divorce?
What I found is this is so common with divorcees and widows that as soon as they get their hands on the money and it's more money than they're used to seeing, they want to be generous. But the problem is
What would you say are some common mistakes retired women make when trying to adjust their finances after losing a partner?
anything you hear in the news, just ignore it because it's garbage. No one wants to talk about, well, what happens if you die?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Your Retirement Planning Simplified. I'm your host, Joe Curry, and today we're talking about how women can build financial strength in retirement after a loss. We're joined by Rachael Burns, who's going to share her insights and strategies with you today. And Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Joe.
Yeah, happy to have you here and happy to talk a little bit about this topic, which I know you're a specialist in. We definitely have actually quite a few widows who are clients. And to be honest, some of my favorite clients. But I'm excited today to really dive into some like strategies and considerations for this group of women. So, with that, before we jump into questions, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and maybe your firm and why you are a specialist in this or how you are?
Sure. So I'm a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. And I have a firm called True Worth Financial Planning that's based in Northern California. And I work entirely with women who are finding themselves suddenly single, either after a divorce or during a divorce, and or after their spouse passes away. So I specialize in all of the challenges of figuring out how to manage your own finances going forward when you're used to managing finances with a partner or having your partner manage finances on your behalf for so long.
Okay, that's awesome. So, could you tell us maybe a little bit more of what led you to want to focus in this area?
Yeah, so I've been a traditional financial advisor for many years. I started my firm about 5 years ago. So I started in the business close to 20 years ago and always worked with big firms. And there's not really an opportunity to specialize so much in those types of firms. You just kind of take on whoever meets the minimums. But what I found, like you said, my favorite clients happen to be widows and divorcees. And what I found with them is they really needed the help. They really appreciated the help. They were willing to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I need help with this." And then they were so grateful when they got help with those types of things. And so I always enjoyed working with them. And when I went independent about 5 years ago, I got to decide who I wanted to work with, which is like the ultimate luxury, being a business owner. And so I was like, I'm just gonna work with women who are newly divorced or newly widowed, and I don't I get to do that. I get to decide to do that. So ever since then, I've been that's all I've been working with, and it's, been the best decision one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Awesome. That's amazing. And like you said, one of the great things about having your own business is you get to make those decisions.
Yeah,
And obviously, when you enjoy the people you work with and are helping, you're just going to be better at what you do as well. So that's a nice added
for
bonus.
sure.
Okay. So let's dive in here. Um, could you talk maybe a little bit about why the retirement years might feel a little more financially vulnerable after losing a spouse or being divorced?
Yeah, so when when you're thinking about your retirement years and when they're way off in the future, and if you're currently married and you're planning a retirement, it involves your spouse or your partner, and you may be including their income and you may be sharing expenses with them. And so you have this vision of what retirement might look like for the two of you. And if all of a sudden now you're planning retirement on your own, that's going to look very different, and that can be very overwhelming. And, you may be facing having less income than expected or more expenses than expected if you're trying to support 2 households with the same income. So, yeah, there are some new challenges that they face when they're planning for retirement as a single person. And so, um, it's extra critical that they get some help if they need it, trying to figure out what is that gonna look like? What do I need to be doing with my investments, with my spending, with my budgeting? Like, there is some extra strategizing that needs to be done.
Okay. And would you say, are there any, I mean, there's obviously like the financial pieces you're just talking about, but are there any unexpected financial shocks that women face after death of a spouse or kind of a later life divorce?
Yeah, so what I found is, especially with women who have not been super involved with the finances during their marriage, once they become single and once they have some visibility into the finances, it's usually a shock. And sometimes it's a good shock. Sometimes, a lot of times, I hear clients say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea we had so much money. My spouse was so frugal and, I had no idea." And sometimes it's a bad shock. Sometimes they're like, "Oh my gosh, I thought we had more than this." Either way, it's a shock and it's a massive adjustment to learning what your financial picture even looks like and then figuring out, well, what am I going to do going forward? That is a huge shock, is just becoming exposed to the financial reality of your situation.
Yeah, and I think even when you like you talked about kind of that a good shock, like, oh my God, I didn't realize there was this much. Or even if maybe they knew, but as a household, and all of a sudden you see everything in your own name. I'm thinking about like a recent widow. And we've seen this with multiple clients where there is way more than they realized, even though they were somewhat involved all along. And then this comes back to some of those like money stories we have from when we were younger. And I've just seen where some widows have been very emotional seeing how big that number is and almost feeling guilty they have this money and feeling like they've benefited from their spouse passing away. And so it creates some other issues that go along with grieving that need to be dealt with that probably aren't really what you were planning on or would expect when
Yeah.
something like this happens.
Yeah.
Um, so, what would you say are some common mistakes retired women make when trying to adjust their finances after losing a partner?
Yeah, so I see, like you just mentioned, I see kind of emotional reactions to financial decisions. And um sometimes they're just making a decision really quickly because of their emotional state. Or sometimes they're making a decision just based on emotions and not based on rational thought.
Yeah,
So, um, and I totally understand. Like, I understand that going through a divorce or having your spouse pass away is so extraordinarily stressful, and we're not at our peak mental performance when we're under that much stress. But what I see them do sometimes is making a decision a little earlier in the process than they should. And a lot of times it's around gifting to family members. So this is so common with divorcees and widows that as soon as they get their hands on the money and it's more money than they're used to seeing, they want to be generous. And especially if it's almost always adult children. And a lot of times the parent, the surviving parent or the divorced parent has some guilt about what the difficulties that the whole family has gone through, and so they want to make their children's lives more comfortable, and they want to offer financial support, but the problem is they haven't figured out what is actually sustainable for them, like, they haven't thought about their own needs yet, and so they're extending this financial support, and I've seen that cause massive financial harm to the giver, and I understand it's
yeah.
from a good place, but figure out if they don't do the initial steps of, like, assessing their own financial situation, that can be really harmful. And then sometimes I see this more with divorcees, but, like, if someone's been married for a long time and they weren't really able to make decisions like, "Well, I wanna remodel the bathroom," or, "I wanna go on this vacation." If they always had this spouse who was kind of nagging them like, "No, we don't wanna spend money on that." Once they become divorced, sometimes those people can fall into some pitfalls, like
Yeah.
getting a little overly excited that they have this power now, which is really
Yeah.
exciting and good, but sometimes they do things like in the previous example, They make a decision, they don't know what their financial situation is, they don't know what's affordable, but they do something like, "I've always wanted to get my kitchen done, so I'm gonna spend $200,000 on a new kitchen," and then they realize after the fact, "Oh, that was like a third of my retirement savings, and now what?" So those are the
Yeah.
pitfalls, is just rushing into decisions and making decisions based on emotions. It's just
Yeah.
super common.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely seen the same things. And do you have any so if you're working with clients, like what's your strategy around helping them maybe just delay making some of these decisions, making sure they're doing the planning? Like how do you get them to focus on understanding their situation before they make kind of the snap decisions?
Yeah, so I have a certain order of operations I go in, and the first stage is we have to take an inventory of their finances. So we need to know, where are the accounts, where are the investments, what income do they have coming in, what expenses do they have coming out, like what bills have to be paid. And this is typically a little more urgent for a widow, like especially if they are suddenly widowed and it wasn't expected.
Right.
There's some urgent stuff like, okay, where is all the stuff? We just need to know where everything is and how to get to it. That's like the first step. And then we start talking about goals at that point. Like, what are the things that are actually important to you? Um, so, for example, if they share that helping my adult children is really, really important and I'm willing to forego these other things because this is so important, we need to have some conversations about that. And I'm not judgmental about what they want to do with their money, but they have to understand that there are some trade offs. So, once they share their goals with me and we've already done the inventory, then I can do some work to figure out, okay, how's the math gonna work? Like, what if you wanna do this thing, what do we need to scale back in this other area of your finances? Or how do we need to reposition things? And so I will kind of tell them, if this is what you want to accomplish, we need to do these things. And we're gonna go through and we're gonna do these things together to make sure that you're on track. And then once we have a plan, once we like know, okay, these are the steps, then we can start doing some of those things that they want to do, but maybe I try to help them pump the brakes a little bit just
Right.
so that we have the facts before we take the action.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then are there certain so you kind of talked about your process, which is great, and kind of like what happens after you find yourself suddenly signal. What kind of things don't need to be addressed right away? Are there things that can just kind of be put off until later to be dealt with?
Yeah, so any of the longer term financial planning things, I am all about putting off. There's so many tasks, whether you're newly divorced or newly widowed, there are so many really annoying administrative tasks to make sure that accounts are in your name, to make sure that you're not locked out of things. There's a lot of really urgent things that need to happen, and there's plenty of those items to keep you busy, and so
Yeah.
anything that we can put off, I'm like, "Don't worry about this, don't worry about this, we're gonna tackle that, like, 6 months from now, don't even worry about it." But, anything long term, like, where do I wanna live for the next 20 years? That doesn't need to be figured out today. When do I wanna retire? So if I'm working with someone who's 45, we don't need to worry so much about pinning down or, longer term retirement dates. Like, there's certain things that we just don't need to worry about, and they have limited capacity in that moment, and I try not to waste too many emotional resources on things
Sure.
that can just be put off, and I think it helps just kinda relieve some of the overall stress when it's like, "Look, we just need to worry about these 3 things right now. Once we get these 3 things done, then we'll move on to the next stuff, but don't even worry about it."
Yeah. I think that, one of the big things about working with a financial planner is that you have someone who can help you identify those highest priority things, right? And then also that confidant or that sounding board to talk to before you make any snap decisions, right? Just
Yeah.
knowing that they're there as that resource. In terms of important tasks, things we can push off versus things that need to get done right away, where does estate planning, so updating wills, powers of attorney, that kind of stuff come in for you?
Estate planning is something that, I mean, I look at it as a super urgent thing. I'm kind of obsessed with estate planning just because I know firsthand how things can go not as you expected them to.
Right.
And so, like, the last thing I wanna do when someone is newly widowed or newly divorced, like, I don't want them to be I hate to dump estate planning on them at that particular moment because it's a big task to figure out what you want to happen, in case of another unexpected event, even though you just went through an unexpected event, but still, I'm like, it's so important. Maybe it's not the very first thing that you do once you are tackling your finances, but it kinda needs to be one of the next things that you do.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's not as difficult. Like, if you don't have any kids or if you know, some people, it's like, "Well, I just need to put beneficiaries on my accounts, and I need to make sure that my house is in my trust, and then we're good to go." But for some people, asking them, "Okay, now that you're newly widowed, imagine a scenario where you die and you have these 2 little kids. Who do you wanna
Yeah.
take care of them?" Like, that's, like, such an overwhelming discussion to have. So I try to kind of tailor it to depending on the situation, but I try to get the estate planning in there as soon as possible because we just don't know what's gonna happen, and, um, e estate planning is even more critical for a single woman, in my opinion, than a woman who is in a partnership or is married because it's just then you're even more at risk of things not going according to your plan.
Yeah, sure. When you're that surviving spouse or only remaining person in the household, yeah, everything is more important because what's going to happen to
Yeah,
you is not it's leaving the household, I guess, right? So,
yeah.
okay, great. Um, so moving on a little bit, thinking about um, how. So you've talked about your process, but thinking kind of longer term. How can women start to kind of gain control of and confidence in their financial future? So, if they haven't been doing this, they're suddenly single. Um, Obviously, there's the immediate tasks they need to take care of and working into those longer term financial planning things. But how do we really get them feeling like they're in control and they're confident in their own finances?
I think that the confidence comes from being more informed. And something as simple as just heightening your awareness of your finances. And even if you've never had to think about this stuff before in your life, you do need to do it, but it's not as overwhelming, I think, as people might think it is. Like, you need to know where stuff is, number 1, which is a lot for some people.
Yeah.
Um, and you need to know vaguely how it all works together. You need to know, okay, I have an emergency fund. I have my retirement account. I have my kind of day-to-day savings account. I have these investments. I'm going to have this pension. Like knowing super big picture what their finances look like now and will kind of look like going forward. Just having an idea of how that looks is half the battle. I think when someone is like, "Oh, I need to manage my own finances, therefore I need to be an expert in Bitcoin, and I need to own rental real estate properties, and I need to learn about, I need to be buying GameStop stock," and I'm just like, anything you hear in the news, just ignore it because it's garbage, but, like, you just need to be an expert in your own finances, and maybe your own finances are really simple, and that's fine, and you don't have to learn about all these other things, but I think just having an understanding of, "This is where I am, this is kinda how things are gonna look going forward," that helps women feel more empowered, just understanding. And then a lot of women who came out of a situation where they didn't feel empowered because they weren't the one that was in charge of the finances, and now they are, that can be empowering. It's like, "Yeah, I know this is overwhelming and scary, but, like, you get to decide what you're gonna spend your money on. You get to decide who you're gonna leave it to when you die. You get to decide how what investments you're comfortable with and which ones you're not. You get to you get to make those decisions, and I think that's exciting for them. They might not feel excited in the moment, but that is empowering in itself. And another thing that can be empowering is getting the help that they need. And for women who again have been delegating that task forever and ever, I think as soon as they're single and starting to delegate that to a professional might not feel empowering, but, like, getting some help and having someone explain things to you in a way that you understand, they're talking to you on your level, you get to decide how much of that those financial tasks you wanna offload to someone else, and you can decide how much of those you wanna take on yourself. But again, you get to decide, and that is empowering. Even if you decide, "You know what? I hate this. I want a financial advisor to do the investments and to tell me how much I can spend." That's empowering because you got to decide that that's what you're gonna do.
Yeah, I mean, it's still your decision, right? And um, being in control and then being confident with your finances, yeah, it doesn't mean you need to be a financial planner. It's like you
Yeah.
said, be an expert in your own finances, understand your situation, and then a good planner is going to help educate you just as you go, right? Just like you
Yeah.
said, right away, helping people at least understand what the trade-offs are if they spend a bunch of money or give a bunch of money to the kids or whatever it is, like just all those kind of things, understanding how your decisions will affect your finances in the future. It's just a very empowering thing to know that kind of stuff. And then I would maybe say to our listeners who are not excuse me, single, widowed or divorced, or whatever the scenario, if you listen, Rachel's talking about some of the things that someone who is newly single is thinking about, how they may not know where all the things are and they may not know what you have. And I would just say that that kind of speaks to the importance of doing your financial planning together when you are in a couple. And then that goes beyond that. We like to talk to our clients a lot about like having those conversations with your kids as well, making sure they understand where things are, what you have, so that way when you pass away and your family's grieving, like the last thing they want to be doing is trying to figure out what bank accounts exist, where the investments are, who they need to talk to. So doing all that kind of stuff together just saves a lot of this stress, I would say. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, Rachel.
Yeah, I think having those discussions with your spouse, with your kids, with your whoever is it's a loving act to share your wishes, to get your questions answered, like asking your spouse, "Okay, if something happens to you tomorrow, where are the accounts? How do I log into these accounts? Who do I contact in case there's an emergency and we need to get money?" Um, it's a loving thing because we don't want our loved ones to be in an absolute panic when they're dealing with grief, if someone, if we die or whatever. Um, we are making their lives easier, and that is a very loving act, and I can tell you, um, being in my profession obviously is helpful, like, with dealing with my own family finances, but with my parents, if we didn't have those conversations early, we could be in a very different position right now, and, um the little things that could be tweaked now could grow into really big problems that can't be changed, and so I just think I know it can be an awkward conversation no matter whether it's your spouse or your parents or whatever, like, no one wants to talk about, "Well, what happens if you die?" Or and then I know with spouses sometimes the spouse will be like, "Oh, you'll be taken care of," but they don't wanna elaborate on that.
Yeah.
'Cause sometimes it's a control thing, but, you have to have those awkward conversations, and it's not gonna be the end of the world. Yeah, it's gonna be uncomfortable for maybe 15 minutes or something, but you can save yourself a world of trouble by just communicating about the finances. I've seen it with my clients, I've seen it in my own life. You just have to have those conversations because the alternative is much more uncomfortable than a 15-minute awkward conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. I couldn't agree more. So to wrap things up here, before I'm going to get you to let everybody know where they can find you and what resources you have. But before that, if you could leave our listeners with one message about building financial strength after loss in retirement, what would it be?
I think focus on the empowerment side. I just meet so many women who do not feel empowered. They didn't feel empowered during the marriage, and then now that they're not in a marriage, they're feeling even less empowered, but again, you are steering the ship now, and maybe you didn't wanna be steering that ship, but you are, and you can look at that and be really scared, and yeah, it is kind of a lot to adjust to, but it is empowering when you get to decide your own fate and you're in control, and you may feel victimized by the situation, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened," but you get to decide how you're going to, react to that and what decisions you're gonna make going forward, and I think that's incredibly empowering. So, I think just trying to keep that positive outlook and looking at it as empowering and not like, "Oh my gosh, all this stuff just got dumped into my lap." I
Yeah.
think that helps a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. So, where can our listeners learn more about you, Rachel? What resources do you have? How can they connect?
Yeah, so, my website is trueworthfp, F as in Frank, P as in Paul.com, and you can learn more about my services. I also have a book that I wrote for new divorcees on how to plan for their financial future. The book is on that website too. So I'm on social media. I don't do much on social media these days, but yeah, the website is a great place to connect with me. And I have a button so that they can book a free consult if anyone wants to chat.
Awesome. That's great. So, retirement planning simplified.ca. If you click on the blog tab, you'll find the episode with Rachel Burns. You can click on that for the show notes, and we'll have all those resources there. So, Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing some of your insights.
Thank you so much, Joe.